respirator training program. Next is glasses, goggles, and face shields. These are used when working around equipment that cut, grind, or shears. They're also used when working with hazardous liquids that can splash. Remember that regular prescription glasses do not meet the requirements of safety glasses. Obtain prescription safety glasses if you need a prescription lens. Next up is hearing protection. These are used when working with noisy equipment or in a high noise area. Gloves. There are many types of gloves to protect from many hazards, including, but not limited to, hazardous chemicals. Check with your safety or maintenance personnel to ensure you're using the proper protection. Foot protection, used when working with hazardous chemicals that may splash onto your feet. Head protection. These include hard hats or hoods to protect from chemical splashes or exposure, and then aprons or full body suits. These provide protection against splashes. A fully encapsulated suit protects against splashes, dust, gases, and vapors. In the event of a hazardous materials incident, you should be acquainted with the basics of first aid. This slide contains very basic information in regards to helping someone as a first responder. Please keep in mind that this first aid information is generic and will work for most chemicals. However, the chemical label and MSDS will provide the best first aid information. An MSDS should accompany anyone who is going to see a medical provider because of exposure to chemicals. When you identify a hazardous spill, you should immediately evacuate the area and notify a supervisor. If it's safe to do so, remove any ignition sources. And most importantly, keep yourself and anyone else away. All employees should be aware of the company's safety evacuation plan in the event of a hazard or fire. See the safety officer for more details. However, throughout the warehouse, there are several plaques which give your location at that plaque, as well as the quickest available route to the nearest exit. Labels are critical to your safety when working with chemicals at work and at home. A person will take the time to read the label on a can of food out of concern over the sodium or fat content. However, the same person may be unaware that the label on a favorite cleaner warns not to breathe the vapors. Every label is different, but they all have similar information. Labels will quickly tell you about the topics you see on the slide. Most labels will also have additional information and warnings that will help you work safely with the chemical. Make sure every chemical container that you use has a label. Put labels on secondary containers when used for a chemical that was dispensed out of a larger container, such as a drum. Labels on secondary containers can be easy as the name of the chemical. Read labels, follow the warnings and instructions, and always ask a supervisor if you do not understand the label information. As we get many carriers from many different places across the United States, you're going to see different labeling systems. One of these includes the National Fire Protection Association labeling system. The NFPA and other organizations have developed a color number coded labeling system. These labels are used as a quick identifier so you can easily determine the basic hazards associated with a chemical. If the numbers in any colored area are high, such as 3 or 4, then you should definitely look more closely at the labels in MSDS. Compare two chemical containers labels that have an NFPA label, one with low numbers and the other with high numbers. You'll find that the chemical with the high numbers will usually contain more information about the hazards, PPE, which is personal protective equipment, and any special handling instructions. The MSDS, or Material Safety Data Sheet, is an important piece of paper that accompanies any hazardous chemical. It's important because it provides in-depth information about the chemical you're working with. You need to know the hazards of the chemical, PPE that should be worn, and symptoms of exposure as well as first aid information, and all of this can be found on every MSDS sheet. It includes the trade name, which is how it's known commonly in the marketplace, the chemical name, which is known how it's known commonly throughout industry, as well as other important identifying factors. The material data books, which contain the MSDS sheets for all of the products we use, are put in 3 locations throughout the warehouse. Shipping and receiving has one, as well as the garage, and the draft service room located midway throughout the warehouse. Any questions about these books can be directed to the safety, traffic, or warehouse manager here at McLaughlin Moran. These sheets will contain the chemical identity, which includes the name, the manufacturer's identity number, and any chemical synonyms for the product. The manufacturer identity, which is the name and emergency phone number of the manufacturer. Hazardous ingredients. This shows the percentage of different hazardous chemicals that are in the product. It also shows exposure levels such as peels and TLVs. Next up are the physical and chemical characteristics. What does the chemical look and smell like? Does it evaporate readily? And do the vapors rise into the air, or do they stay near the ground? Does this chemical mix with water, or is it heavier or lighter than water? Next up are fire, explosion, and reactivity data. What materials are used to fight a fire that involves a chemical? Does it give off vapors that burn readily? Is the chemical not compatible with any other materials? Does it decompose or possibly react with itself? The next, and a very important part of the MSDS, is the health hazards associated with the chemical. This is important for you to read and understand. It's important for you to know the signs of overexposure and how the chemical can affect you. This includes the routes of entry and the overexposure levels, as well as the symptoms of exposure. Lastly, it gives first aid recommendations and explains what action should be taken to correct the overexposure symptoms. The MSDS will conclude by showing you the proper protective equipment to use when dealing with it, how to safely handle and store the material, how to recover from any spills or leaks, and then compliance issues, which include the disposal requirements for the chemical. Does the DOT have specific shipping restrictions, and is the chemical required to be reported under community right-to-know laws? McLaughlin Moran is committed to our company right-to-know program, and in taking this training you should take away the following points. You should be able to identify a chemical hazard by reading a label or an MSDS sheet. You should be able to follow warnings and instructions, or if you're in any doubt, you should ask your supervisor. You should use the correct personal protective equipment when using hazardous materials. Practice sensible and safe work habits, and learn any emergency procedures. This concludes our training on hazardous communication and the Rhode Island Right to Know. Any questions can be directed at wrobillard@mclaughlinmoran.com. Thank you.